Ambitious visions are exciting. They're fun to work on. In fact, I think in 2018, at least in Silicon Valley, it's easier to start a hard startup than it is to start an easy startup. Now, this sounds paradoxical, but ambitious projects are interesting. In the current environment, it may be relatively easy to raise capital, but it's really hard to do everything else. There's so many startups. It's so easy to start one. They all sound so promising that bringing together enough talent in one organization is really hard to do. And if you're working on a problem that may be modestly successful, it's kind of easy to get the first few people to join. You can give them a lot of equity, but then it gets really hard. Why is employee 20 going to join? Why does this matter to the world? Why should someone work on your startup versus any of the other things they could do? And picking something that matters if you're successful is a great way to do that. And so I think it's really important to think about when you're starting the company, how is this going to evolve into a vision that a lot of people want to help with, that a lot of people want to be associated with? Because I think getting talent and getting mind share is really hard in the current environment, and people are interested in startups that matter. Another thing that we've noticed among our best founders again and again and again is that they have a confident and definite view of the future. They may be wrong, and so we say it's good to be confident and flexible, but this idea that you are confident and definite, this is what I think is going to happen, or this is what is going to happen, and being relatively sure of that, having courage of your convictions, one of the most important jobs you have as a founder is to never lose momentum. And this is a little bit depressing because it means for the first few years, you never get to take your foot off the gas. You never get to really rest. We try to be honest about this, that startups are not the best choice for work-life balance at all, but especially in the early days. Startups survive on their own momentum. If you have momentum, people keep delivering results beyond what they think they're capable of. If you lose momentum, it's very difficult to get it back. And so continuing to make sure that the startup has a cadence, that the startup keeps winning on a relatively short and predictable intervals, this is really important, and it's up to the founders to make sure that you don't lose a hold of this. Another thing that we think startups need is a competitive advantage over time. Now, this is something that sounds so obvious, I hesitated to even put it in. This is well discussed, but we're seeing more and more startups apply to YC, and when we ask them, so what is the long-term monopoly effect here? What is the long-term competitive advantage? Where is the network effect in this business? They look at us like it's the first time they've ever heard this question. All of the really great businesses I know have an answer to this question, and in fact, the better they are, the more they pretend not to. But this is something that you want to have a plan for. Another thing you want to have a plan for is at least a sensible business model. You don't have to have it all figured out at the beginning. The most important thing, the number one lesson we try to teach startups is that the degree to which you're successful approximates the degree to which you build a product that is so good, people spontaneously tell their friends about it. Startups always ask us for the secret to success. They always want to believe it's something other than this, because this is really hard to do. But this is it. If you can build a product that is so good, people spontaneously tell their friends about it, you have done 80% of the work that you need to be a really successful startup. If you think about the most successful companies you know, Google, Facebook, whatever, you probably found out about them because a friend of yours said, you got to try this, it's great. So this is the bar. Something that people love so much they tell their friends about it. One important indicator for a product like that is a product that's simple to explain and easy to understand. If you can't explain in a few words what you do, and if at least some people don't say, oh, that's pretty interesting, that's usually a mistake. It's usually a sign of unclear thinking or a need that is not big enough. Another thing that startups need to look for is a market that is either started to undergo or is soon going to undergo exponential growth. I think this is actually related to one of the biggest mistakes investors make when evaluating startups. Investors always say, well, what's your growth rate? We care about the growth rate. Investors will forgive smallish revenue today if it's growing quickly. For some reason, people don't think about markets this way. But if you think about the most important startups, they are the ones that I start in small markets that are growing very, very quickly. 11 years ago, the market for iPhone apps was $0. It's now huge. And I think if you only think about the TAM today, you'll make a big mistake. A real trend is something that's actually going to happen and a fake trend is not, or at least not yet. And before you make a big bet on a new platform, you want to make sure it's real. Now, there's an easy trick for this, which I'll share now. Real trends are ones where a new technology platform comes along and the early adopters use it obsessively and tell their friends how much they love it. A fake trend is one where people may buy the product, but don't use it, or at least not enough. So an example of a real trend, I already mentioned the iPhone, I'll mention that again. When the iPhone first came out, many people were dismissive because they only sold 1 million or 2 million that year. And they said, well, this just doesn't matter. But for the people that had an iPhone, they used it for hours every day. It became central to their lives. They loved it. They told their friends, you got to get one. And I think it was obvious then to people paying attention that something had fundamentally shifted. And we had a new computing platform that was going to spawn huge businesses. And it was a good time to bet on mobile apps. A fake trend, or at least a fake trend as of August 2018, I would say is VR. I do believe VR will be big someday, but today most people that I know that own a VR headset use it never or very rarely. And so although a lot of people talk about it, and maybe even a lot of people buy them, there's not the intense usage per user among the early adopters that I think you want to see before you make a big bet. Another thing that startups need, at least one evangelical founder, usually the CEO. Someone at the startup has got to be the person that is going to recruit, sell the product, talk to the press, raise money. And this requires someone who can infect with enthusiasm the whole world about what the company is trying to do. And someone who becomes the chief evangelist for the company